Convoy HX-228 sailed under attack alert at 11:43 hours. HMS Fame maintained a SDIC contact on a submerged target. Her commander ordered a single forward salvo of 24 small bombs, until one sharp crack broke the surface calm. The new forward-throwing mortar. A miss remained silent, a hit destroyed. In 1942, it took 80 depth-charge attacks to sink one U-boat. This statistical inversion marked a decisive shift. A contact plot chalked on a bridge bulkhead. Each time the escort charged in, pencil lines marked the predicted path. Officers stared at the plotting table, watching the contact fade precisely when they needed it most. Required the attacker to pass directly over the submerged target. The U-boat had a warning propeller noise rising, hull vibration increasing. Operational summaries from Western approaches. Around 1 to 2% in the worst months of 1942. Captain Frederick John Walker recorded the Central Paradox in Admiralty Report S. Depth charges typically 300-pound class with hydrostatic fuses. Not actual target position. Diamonds or curtains to increase probability, but the explosions themselves, and often forced a re-attack cycle, the mismatch between sensor and weapon. Produced low kill ratios, high ammunition expenditure. That jeopardized convoy spacing and maneuver freedom. Recorded multiple barges yielded negative evidence. Oil sightings unconfirmed. In the first 6 months of 1942, Germany launched an average of 20 new U-boats each month. Was turning out submarines faster than Allied escorts could sink them. In June 1942, alone convoy losses reached 700,000 tons of shipping. For 11 confirmed sinkings. Not the cruise was the limiting factor. A test memorandum laid on a drafting table. Contact fuse sensitivity notes and pattern geometry sketches. Debating propellant loads and impact angles. Favored heavier charges and larger patterns. Smaller individual bombs fired ahead, detonating only if they struck the target. Charles F. Lieutenant I. They tested impact sensitivity on steel plates. The prototype Hedgehog anti-submarine projector consisted of 24 spigots arranged in a circular crown pattern. Total projectile weight around 15. Each bomb carried 30 to 35 pounds of Torpex high explosive filling. The pattern footprint measured 100 to 140 feet in diameter. Prevented water column detonations. Whether they hit the submarine or not. Hedgehog bombs detonated only on direct contact with a solid object. Single operator electrical firing aligned with the sonar solution. so the bombs entered the water near simultaneously. ADMWD note from late 1941 stated the objective plainly. Avoid hydrostatic explosions that saturate receivers. Enabling immediate reacquisition and rapid repeat salvos. The escort could continue seeing the target while striking it. Bench tests recorded hull plate rupture thresholds. Early tank trials against representative steel plates. On-contact engineers calculated that a single 65-pound bomb would rupture 3/4-inch plating. Instead of trying to crush a submarine with water pressure, Hedgehog delivered a shaped charge directly against the hull. Was the difference between survival and catastrophic failure? As the prototype stabilized in late 1941, Hamburg and Bremen turned out new boats at increasing rates. The race had begun turning precision. Outnumbered at sea. Stopwatch plotting board and recorder stood by as the first pattern entered the water. Traditional trials of depth charges often recorded probables. Hedgehog trials produced clear binary evidence. A series of live exercises returned 5 direct hits in 14 firings. This represented an order of magnitude improvement over baseline. In comparable geometry, the math was undeniable. Compared to the 1 to 2%. In 1942 operational conditions, Collins reviewed the trial data and wrote in trial memorandum, "The absence of noise was itself a weapon. It meant psychological advantage when depth charges exploded and could take evasive action during the sonar blackout. The submarine crew had no indication of danger. If impact came at all, the Admiralty standardized them out. The official designation Hedgehog Anti-Submarine Projector Mark 10. Escort destroyers, corvettes, and frigates. And deck strength plans that allowed 48-hour fitment. Installation was remarkably straightforward and required reinforced deck plating. No major structural modifications were necessary. An escort arriving for refit could receive a Hedgehog installation. The move from test bed to fleet. Tactics training syllabi at Londonderry and other anti. The hold fire required doctrine. Helm and firing key within a 50 to 60-second cycle. The key was maintaining steady ASTIC contact to place the pattern where the submarine would be. Ship motion and water conditions. The first production units reached operational escort groups. Crews trained intensively on dummy runs before facing real contacts. One operator, one firing. Key clear visual confirmation of pattern entry. 6 months after the Portsmouth trials. Would confirm the trial data. Now the Atlantic would deliver its own production. Ledger entries tallied launcher frames by week. Cases of Torpex were allocated and logged in ordnance manifests. Pre-Hedgehog thinking. Hedgehog's value was cost-effective. Modest warheads multiplied by pattern geometry and accurate placement. For launchers, United States partners, including Bethlehem, produced additional amounts. Unit cost for a launcher was approximately 2,000 pounds sterling. Installation time of 48 hours. For major anti-submarine warfare refits. Replenished during convoy turnarounds in port. Ballistic calibration and fuse proofing ran alongside. Based on contact quality and engagement geometry. Prioritized distribution. Mediterranean and Arctic routes follow as fittings permit. Allowed rapid doctrinal standardization across key escort classes. More attacks could be carried out per contact, reducing ammunition consumption and increasing tactical flexibility. United States yards added another 800. Each bomb represented a precisely manufactured fuse. Explosive quality control was essential for contact reliability. Training schools reported crews reducing attack latency. A quiet miss allowed near-instant reattack. And freeing escorts sooner to reform protective screens. For every ton of Torpex packed into Hedgehog bombs, 3 tons of merchant shipping were saved from submarine attack. Logistics officers calculated that a single Hedgehog salvo cost approximately 35 pounds sterling in materials. A depth charge pattern of 10 charges cost substantially more. The cost. By mid-year 1943, ceased to be an exception. Production had scaled to match operational demand. The factories of silence were running at full capacity. A contact designated Red 5 held steady on the plot as sea state rose. The commander gave the order. The firing key closed. Dropped astern with uncertain evidence of effect. HMS Fame salvo produced 2 underwater detonations. Debris and oil appeared on the surface. Commanded by Oberleutnant Wolfgang Rosenbaum. Smith recorded the action in his official report. No pattern thunder, a single crack echo. Absent oil, observed the contact only. Principle eliminated. Blind. Command to privilege a forward salvo unsteady. Before considering any astern depth charge pattern. Probability and engineering. Fame had maintained continuous sonar contact throughout the attack run. The U-boat maneuvering to evade moved directly into the pattern footprint. 2 bombs struck the pressure hull. Within 48 hours, a second contact in the convoy's protective orbit. This second kill achieved by another escort in the same group. The weapon worked as designed under operational conditions. Word spread through Western approaches. Signal traffic increased. The quiet ring of projectiles on the Fox Lee could do what tons of conventional depth charges often could not. For years, they had prosecuted attacks with limited feedback explosions. Hedgehog gave binary clarity. Silence meant miss and immediate reattack. U-boat survivors recovered from other actions. One submariner stated there was no warning cascade of explosions, just sudden impact and flooding. The Directorate of Miscellaneous Weapons. Small bombs contact fuses had been proven in combat. Admiralty Signal CX-21. Escorts were instructed to favor Hedgehog on any firm. The weapon was no longer experimental. It was operational doctrine. An instructor at the Anti-Submarine Warfare School pointed to a chart. Attacks, kills, and success rates by weapon type filled the columns. 1942 attack-to-kill ratios with depth charges had been discouraging. In confirmed sinkings per attempt, indicated success rates for Hedgehog, and then low double digits. A representative comparison for 1943 showed depth charge attacks. For scores of kills, approximately 1 to 2% success rate. Hedgehog attacks numbered in the hundreds for dozens of kills, with significant variation across theaters and tactical conditions. In autumn 1943, reacquire loop, reattack immediately. Unless contact degrades below firing solution quality, to project the pattern where the echo would be. Quiet misses conserved ammunition and preserved contact history. A detailed statistical study showed that first salvo, depending on contact quality, second salvo probability when fired within 90 seconds of the first, because the submarine was still within the same water volume. The measured improvement shifted resource allocation. Over some secondary gun upgrades. Geometry confused reliability checks. The average time from initial contact to confirmed kill dropped to under 5 minutes with Hedgehog. Escorts could prosecute contacts faster. Ammunition expenditure per kill also declined dramatically. Traditional depth charge attacks. Hedgehog attacks averaged fewer than 10 salvos. Given production constraints and logistics. By autumn 1943. To add a second launcher. These requests represented administrative proof, not supplemental. The numbers rewrote doctrine because they were undeniable. In naval warfare, where resources are finite and every ship matters. The strategic calculus. A technical sketch on a beveled shaver der U. Cross-section margin notes in German script. Intelligence officers studied captured fragments. German countermeasures for depth charges. Bubble decoys called Pillenwerfer had some value against preset depth detonations. Only strike delivered. BDU directives in late 1943 warned about the new English weapon. Technical analysis recognized that evasion windows were too short. Traditional evasion tactics assumed a sonar blackout period. Change course or deploy decoys. AU. Later captured and translated. There is no warning one moment the sea is quiet. The comment appeared in interrogation files documenting you. Or air released from canisters. Because misses generated no blasts and no acoustic cue for the submarine to change tactics. Until impact occurred. Thicker hull plating was rejected. Improved hydrophones to detect the projectiles entering the water. The time between detection and impact was measured in seconds. Decoy devices proved useless. One proposal suggested, but testing showed the materials affected sonar performance equally. Another suggested, but this required knowing an attack was incoming. As countermeasures lagged, the consequence was statistical. Constraining Wolfpack operations. Available for convoy interception. U-boat losses reached 19 boats. While multiple factors contributed. Increased air cover and code breaking. Featured prominently in operational analysis. Unable to counter the weapon effectively. And reduced concentration in the North Atlantic gaps. This strategic withdrawal. A printed attack sheet clipped to a plotting board. Ship speed fire solution. Require order. Old attack cycles ran. Standardized Hedgehog drills cut engagement time under 1 minute. Escort Group 2. And consorts reported double-digit confirmed kills over 12 months. Most were attributed to forward-throwing attacks using disciplined. Other groups operating in the North Atlantic and Bay of Biscay. And fewer re-attack legs required per kill. To stabilize the contact bearing. To improve pattern placement. Radar and HFDF for initial detection and interception. Created a layered defense that was greater than the sum of its parts. The updated instructions read: repeat salvo immediately from adjusted bearing, except to finish a damaged target confirmed by debris or survivors. Restored tactical initiative to escorts. Now continuous contact meant continuous threat. Boats spent less time on the surface charging batteries and broke off attacks more readily under marginal conditions. With faster prosecution of submarine contacts, this reduced merchant exposure time in danger areas. With less fuel consumption and lower crew fatigue, post-action surveys indicated that knowing whether an attack succeeded through detonation or silence during subsequent engagements. Statistical analysis of engagements from October 1943. First attack success rates ranged from 8 to 14%. Increased cumulative success to 20 to 30%. Pushed cumulative probability above 40%. Quiet approach silent miss or single lethal crack became the soundscape of the mid-ocean war. Sharp reports from escort positions and sometimes debris recovery operations. As Hedgehog adoption spread fleet-wide, forward-throwing mortar with contact fuses. For close engagements, depth charges remained aboard for area denial. But the opening attack belonged to Hedgehog. Flipped through pink sheets. Boat sunk, damaged, or missing. The columns are filled with unprecedented numbers. Through 1942. By May 1943, Allied records show more than 40 U-boats destroyed in May alone. Simultaneously, a Kriegsmarine diary entry from Befehlshaber U. Withdraw from North Atlantic route. Long-range air cover HFDF direction finding. And the precision strike capability now available to surface escorts. It completed a technological chain. Direction finding raised the odds of finding a submarine. Where submarines had previously operated with relative safety. Once located, the cumulative effect shortened U-boat patrol endurance. But through survival probabilities, now faced immediate lethal threat upon detection. Disrupted Wolf Pack concentration. Statistical analysis of May 1943 showed a fundamental shift. The rate of U. Germany's submarine force began shrinking in absolute numbers. March 1943 saw 120 Allied merchant ships sunk. The decline continued through summer and autumn. And coastal routes where single submarines could still operate. The human cost of May 1943 fell heavily on U-boat crews. Loss of 40 boats meant approximately 2,000 men killed or captured. British and American escort crews. Contacts that once LED to prolonged engagements. The psychological pressure shifted from defenders to attackers, decreasing probability of escape, that the ocean had become transparent to Allied technology. Withdrawing from the North Atlantic, interdicting Allied supply lines to Britain. He chose withdrawal. With improved technology, for the first time since the fall of France in 1940, the Atlantic sea lanes were open. May 1943 marked the climax of the Atlantic battle. At the Anti-Submarine Warfare Training Facility, blast gauges were prepared for measurement. The United States Navy moved from adoption to adaptation, stabilized mounts, and the rocket-propelled mousetrap variant. In rougher sea states, through these refinements, approaching the high teens or better in favorable conditions. Euro-stabilized aiming systems, and better projectile assembly tolerances. USS England designation D635 demonstrated the operational sealing of the sensor to salvo approach. England sank 6 Japanese submarines in 12 days. Each attack followed the same pattern. Hedgehog salvo immediate reattack if no detonation. Confirmed kill through debris or breaking up noises. Turned into operational reality. England's success generated fleet-wide attention. There will always be an England in the United States Navy Fleet. Pacific and Chief of Naval Operations. One communique stated, destroyer escorts employing ahead-throwing projectors, and reduced ammunition expenditure compared to depth-charge sequences. Additional launchers. American industrial capacity produced standardized components. Quality control infused production reduced dud rates. Through systematic instruction, United States destroyer escorts were being commissioned with Hedgehog. The weapon was no longer an addition during refit. This integration reflected lessons learned from British experience. Effective systems cost analysis showed dramatic return on investment. A U-boat required national resources to construct steel, skilled labor-trained crew. Construction time exceeded 1 year. A Hedgehog salvo cost approximately $50. The economic exchange ratio favored the defender. Validated the weapon against Japanese submarines, but faced the same vulnerability to direct contact weapons, often larger and used for supply runs to isolated garrisons. Weapon integration that devastated the U. Demonstrated American industrial and engineering culture. Standardized components trained systematically and deploy at scale. These principles turned Hedgehog from British innovation. Across 2 oceans, an interrogation report lay open on a desk at an Allied intelligence facility, used by multiple prisoners to describe the weapon. Depth charge attacks for all their explosive power. the characteristic sound of an escort passing overhead. Provided seconds to take emergency measures. Turn hard release decoys. Hedgehog offered neither warning nor hope. Interrogation summaries and officer reports, emphasizing shock at an attack with no preparatory explosion curtain. We heard propeller noise increasing in bearing rate, then nothing, then impact, and instant flooding through ruptured frames. Crews lacked acoustic cues to execute last-second maneuvers. By which point, not tactical skill, the psychological dimension of this reversal affected operational behavior across the U. Analysis of patrol reports. Starting in late 1943, boats that previously spent hours now broke off more readily under marginal conditions. Submarines required surface running to charge batteries. Time on the surface meant vulnerability to radar detection. Slower speed limited battery endurance and vulnerability to surface escorts. Morale reports filed by German naval intelligence. Unlike surface combat, where threats were visible, depth charges at least provided audible evidence of the threat. Hedgehog offered only uncertainty. An Admiralty report from the Q series. No warning, sound 1 detonation. Total systems failure reported by survivors. The reversal extended beyond individual psychology. Naval warfare is ultimately mathematics. Probability of escape, probability of completing mission objectives. Commanders became more conservative in risk acceptance. This conservatism manifested in measurably fewer torpedo attacks. Submarines that survived their first few patrols learned caution. By winter 1944 through 45. Short report followed by silence. But the presence of a weapon that killed without warning. The hunters had become the hunted. A staff officer totaled columns in a blue-backed report attacks. Kills, expenditures, costs. The final accounting of the Atlantic campaign filled dozens of volumes. Wartime improvisation gave way to audited totals. Boat losses to Hedgehog and its descendants. Post-war tallies. Contact-fused weapons of 781 German U-boats lost during the war, with substantial contribution to nearly 250 sinkings. Average salvos per kill were calculated at fewer than 5. Which often exceeded 20 patterns per confirmed sinking. Compared to over 60,000 pounds for depth charge only engagements. Fuel for extended searches and ship time. In 1942, convoy arrival rates in Britain averaged 88%. By late 1944, arrival rates exceeded 98%. This 4-ship improvement per 100. Fuel ammunition. The analysis also identified limitations. Environmental thermal layers could complicate contact solutions. Direct hits were still required. Yet within these constraints, and measurably superior to preceding systems, restored convoy throughput and sustained decline in merchant losses. Without secure Atlantic sea lanes, the Mediterranean campaigns depended on Gibraltar and Malta. The build-up in Britain for strategic bombing required. One Admiralty summary from 1946 captured the assessment. Integrated with continuous contact systems and shortened engagement timelines. Another statistical finding stood out. Convoys could sail more direct routes. The average Atlantic crossing time decreased from 16 days to 13 days. This time compression multiplied effective shipping capacity. Victory at sea was counted not just in boats sunk. The quiet weapon had helped reopen the Atlantic lifeline. North Africa and beyond, a dockside photograph captured a newer triple-barrel mortar. The caption noted, Hedgehog proved the fundamental principle. Combined with contact-fused forward-thrown weapons, with preset depth charges. Squid developed in late war years and deployed widely post-war. Featured 3 large mortar. The range extended to 400 yards. Including warhead, the system incorporated automatic firing. Based on sonar tracking data, contact fusing and forward throw. The post-war evolution. Automated loading systems. Yet, post-war reviews from senior officers underlined the conceptual shift. Victory owed more to the alignment of sensor and weapon than to raw. Reviewing the Atlantic campaign captured the lesson plainly. Success came from the silence of Hedgehog's aim rather than noise. After 1945, the components were radar and HFDF for interception. A head-throwing mortar for lethal engagement. Each element was necessary. Together they were sufficient. The lesson outlived the war. Engineering that aligns sensing with strike timing. In later decades, rocket-propelled torpedoes and helicopters with dipping sonar all inherited the Hedgehog premise. Don't blind yourself with your own weapon. From area bombardment to precise engagement. The technology itself aged. But the principle endured in every modern anti-submarine warfare system. Know where the target is, keep knowing, throughout the engagement and strike without creating sensor blackout. A large fraction fell to anti-submarine warfare systems. The exact attribution is complex. Depth charges finished what Hedgehog started. Surface escorts waited, but the statistical evidence was clear. Submarine loss rates increased, and remained high through the war's end. In the calculus of war, where logistics determine outcomes, that quiet innovation proved strategically decisive, testing projectiles against steel plates. But history recorded the result. 24 spigots in a circular crown, firing ahead into the dark water, ending the warning and turning the tide. Represents a case study in how technical innovation changes campaign outcomes. Measurably to Allied victory in the Atlantic, but through evolutionary improvement in kill probability. Synchronize sensors with weapons. Measure effectiveness objectively. These principles transcend specific platforms and eras. If you value history told through verified documents, consider supporting this channel. Fact-driven historical narratives. Share your thoughts in the comments.